We are back, people. Whoop, whoop.
Welcome to another week of Case Files
With Kat
and Ashley.
We are ready to party today.
We are.
And we're sober.
Well,
get the fuck out of here. What you drinking?
I am drinking strawberry kiwi cider from St. Arnold. I've never had this one before. And let me say, I was nervous because I don't normally like kiwi, but this is such a good cider. And it says a most saintly cider. And then it says so fresh, so fruity. Hey. It's
we like fruity.
Yes, it is so good, guys. Like, if you like ciders, this is such a good one. Anyways, that's what I'm drinking. What are you drinking?
Oh, same old shit. But no, I'm just kidding. I don't even know. Jason opened it for me.
This is so good.
Oh, I got the Shiner's Brewhaus Brew IPA.
Oh.
It's a go-to now in the house. You know, all the different Shiner IPAs. They've come out with a couple of the double IPAs that Jason really likes. I'm still on the Brewhaus Brew. And that's just the regular old IPA. I don't know, the double IPAs for some reason I'm just like I can only have one. So like it doesn't like I don't it's
you don't get the social aspect of the drinking.
No, it's just that it's not something like I would buy the 6-pack and that's what I'm having at the house. Like I need to have other things because I can't. Because if I drink 2, then. Good night, sweetheart. Well,
I feel like I could drink a 12-pack of this. It's so good. I'm not saying I would be functional. I'm just saying I could.
Well, I went to Blay, while I was buying beer for...
At 9 a.m., folks.
No. Okay,
No,
sure. Ma'am. For the first new teachers basket.
Okay.
That we welcomed new teachers into our school district by giving them a shit ton of beer.
Woo!
Because, I mean, they're going to need it.
Yeah.
It's a functional gift. Everyone else was giving school supplies. This is school supplies.
If they don't drink beer, they will after the school year starts.
For the teachers who want to relax with a little true crime,
Yes.
and beer. That's we're the only game in town.
Yes. We're also number 1
in town. In our small little
guys,
town.
Our basket was so much like our show. I didn't mean to interrupt your story, but you know how our show is a shit show. You should have seen our baskets. The wrapping on our baskets, guys, was phenomenal.
But it tracked.
It was good.
It tracked. Everyone else had these beautiful,
professionally done.
Danny is gonna be so mad that we didn't ask her for help. But listen, this is why I'm not a good mom either. Everyone else, like they bring these, like I just look at them and go, does somebody know how to curl hair? Because my daughter needs curls. You know what I mean? Like there are just some things I'm just not good at, and that's one of them. But but we had fun. The teacher who won our basket today, the real ugly one. She's
referring to the basket, not the teacher.
The real ugly basket.
Just before we get any hate, not the teacher.
Oh my God.
Ugly gift basket.
Everyone's like,
she was so excited.
Bitch. No. I meant the ugly basket that we taped. It was like... It was like Frankenstein. It was all...
It was great. It was perfect.
It was great. It had a lot of beer in it.
Yes, it did. Yes, it.
But they didn't say beer. They said it was water with barley and hops.
They're not allowed to say.
Fermented wine, fermented grapes.
Yes.
We're in some of the other ones. Anyway, what you got for us? Because we're back. It's been a while, I feel like.
It has been.
We ended with Synanon craziness.
Oh my gosh, that feels like a year ago.
I know, it does. You had a good trip?
I did. I'm wearing my matching earrings to my niece. We have matching gummy bear earrings.
I commented on them earlier.
Yes. That was my takeaway from the trip. No, it was good. It was really good to be away from Texas. And now I'm back, so Anywho, did you have a good 2 weeks? Was it fabulous? What? I don't even know what.
I don't I don't remember. The kids are doing Willy Wonka this weekend, and Olivia is Veruca Salt, and Anderson is Mike TV.
How exciting.
And we are so excited. And I have tickets if you want to go. If you and Dustin want to go and join us on Saturday, you can come.
Oh.
No, I have tickets. Anyway,
that's I don't know. It feels like it's our first episode.
I know. So I'm a Libra, and
I like long walks on the beach.
I don't really like pina coladas though.
Oh. Anyway, I guess we'll just get started then. Jesus, way to kill the vibe.
If you like pina coladas. Okay, sorry. Sorry.
We had a whole discussion about how we're gonna make our studio more professional for you guys, even though I'm sure the wizard wishes we were done with this podcast.
Listen, so the conversation started. We could sound better if we had, better mics, better equipment. It's like, but Jason the wizard bought us this shit thinking, they're not going to last much longer 5 years later.
Joke's on you guys.
Joke is on you. But hey, if you're listening,
we love
thank you.
Yes.
You have our undying love and appreciation forever and ever. And know that we're here for you because, we don't do this to be rich and famous. We're not trying to get sponsors yet. We're not asking you for money yet. And, we're not selling merch yet. But this is
so fun for us. For me.
I know. And I was like, I love to research about cults because it's fascinating how they even start and how people can, just the need to belong is so strong. And I was talking to the teachers at my table and they're like, what's the favorite thing, your favorite story you've covered? And I'm like, I can answer that, but I was like, it's going to be dark. I don't know if you really want to know.
I like having an excuse for my search history. Yeah, I have a true crime podcast.
However popular or unpopular it is.
It still exists.
It still exists.
Okay, for reals, I guess I'll get started.
Yeah, get started.
So it's been a while since I've done a disappearance case, and I just figured this was now a great time to do one. So I read about this one when I was back home on the East Coast. I love doing disappearances because you literally just never know who may be listening and may know something years later, even if they you don't think it's significant. Any little bit helps when people are missing. A lot of times families just want to know where their loved ones are, what happened to them. They just want some closure. And it also blows my mind how someone can just vanish forever without a trace. In today's world where there's so much technology, it just blows my mind. So anyways, tonight I'm going to be talking about the disappearance of Christopher Thompkins. So Christopher was born December 28th, 1981. Outside of that, there's just not a whole lot known about his childhood, his young adult years, things like that. But what was known was at the time of his disappearance, he was living in Columbus, Georgia. So throughout this story...
So how old was he?
He was 20.
Okay, so we don't know anything about his parents.
I'm going to talk about his mom in a minute, but just as far as his childhood goes. But it doesn't really play a factor into the, you know what I mean? Sometimes it does, but
yeah, that's true. That's true.
So in this story, he lives in Harris County, and I'm just going to say that for people who are in Texas, this may be a little confusing. When I say Harris County, I'm referring to Harris County, Georgia, not Harris County, Texas.
Got it.
Okay. So on January 25th, 2002, 20-year-old Christopher Thompkins vanished without a trace. He was working with the surveying crew in a wooded area near Highway 85 in Harris County, Georgia. Despite extensive searches and investigations, the circumstances of his disappearance remain baffling and to this date is still unsolved. And when I start talking about what his coworkers claimed happened and what the police claimed happened, it is so far-fetched. And so this is a really strange disappearance. So Christopher Thompkins was described as ambitious. He was responsible. He was working for a surveyor as a surveyor for a company in Georgia. He was known for his dependable nature. He was loved literally by everyone. And on the day of his disappearance, he left for work as usual. There was nothing out of the ordinary. And that was the last time he was really seen, was at his job this day. So Christopher had started working very recently for this surveying company, and he was really eager to prove himself in this new role. And so he was described by friends and family as someone who was always punctual and took his responsibilities very seriously.
At that young age. That's pretty good. I mean, 20, still...
So he was described as a devout Christian and was well liked by everyone in the community. He lived with his mother, who was Ann McKenzie, in Elserly, Georgia. So Ann was the babysitter for the owner of the surveying company where Chris worked. So they were tied in. Like she worked as the babysitter for the owner, and Chris was a surveyor at the company. So his sudden disappearance was very out of character. Like, there was nothing wrong with his life. Nothing was happening. He wasn't he wasn't a drug addict or an alcoholic, and he didn't owe anybody. You know what I mean? Like,
he was like a college-age kid with a job, probably drank, maybe smoked pot.
Very happy with his life, very into his church. Like,
oh, did he drink and smoke at all?
He didn't drink. They mentioned he smoked pot like one time.
Oh, yeah. So totally.
Yeah. Okay, so the day of his disappearance. So he left home and he headed into work around 8 a.m. on that morning. He parked his car at the company office and then rode with the owner of the company to the job site. So the owner of the company is named Gary. And some articles said it was with the owner, some said it was with a coworker, but either way, he parked his car at the company, drove to the job site. Like, rode to the job site.
It feels like that's important, though, right?
Yeah. Well, okay. I think what it is like they all rode together. You know what I mean? Like, they took a company vehicle and they were all in it. That's the impression I got.
So after not just him and one other person, but him, one other person, and then a couple of other people.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like it was a company vehicle. Anyway, so Christopher, along with 3 other crew members, were surveying a plot of land along Highway 85. So the team was spread out in a line, with each member about 50 feet apart, marking points as they moved forward through the dense woodland. So 50 feet is not far. And so everyone could see everybody, right? Like, you're in line. Like, it would be like you were 50 feet in front of me. Chris was the second person in line. So 1 in front of him, 2 behind him. This day seemed ordinary as the crew went about their work. They were in a relatively remote area, surrounded by dense woods and rough terrain. So it's important to note this is January. It's winter. It's cold. The area they're in there's like maybe a few homes or whatever. This is not like a big city. This is a remote area. They're in a line, 50 feet apart from everyone.
So is it 2 by 2, 1 by 1?
1 by 1.
Okay.
Like in a straight line.
Okay.
Anyways, so they took a lunch break, and then around 1:30 they resumed working. Shortly after this, and this is where it starts to get so weird. So shortly after they come back from lunch, one of the surveyors claims he was in the middle of a conversation with Chris when he looked away for just a moment and turned his head to look at something. And when he looked back seconds later, Chris was just missing. That's what they say happened.
What?
At first, they thought he might have simply fallen behind or veered off the path slightly, but after calling out his name and receiving no response, they realized something was wrong.
I mean, he would have had to been abducted or something, because they're
by a fucking UFO.
That's what I'm saying. Like you're in dense brush, right? So you can't just run And someone's going to see...
They're in a straight line 50 feet apart from each other. He claims they were in the middle of a conversation, and he just turned his head real quick and looked back, and he was just gone. That's what he says happened.
So, either... Okay, I'm just saying.
Yeah, wait till you hear the other stuff, but go on.
Either some shit went down and then they all jumped him and killed him and he got lost out there in the wilderness, and this was the story, like, I don't know, just and like that's their story, like, that everyone believes, or it was aliens. I'm not gonna
I forgot to mention that Christopher is African American.
And the rest of them are white.
This will come into play later.
Okay. So
I don't know the races of the other people. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm assuming with the name Gary, the owner's white. Just my assumption. So the search for Christopher, per his coworkers, began immediately. They claim, at least when speaking to Chris's family and the police, that they found no evidence, which is kind of a strange statement when I talk about what his family did. So there was no sign of struggle. There was no indication of what could have happened to him. The crew claims that they called 911, but the police told the men to wait 24 hours before they could file a missing persons report. So one of the co-workers, though, the owner, Gary, called his wife to tell her that Christopher was missing, but Christopher's own mother was not called by the crew until 3 hours later at 4:15 that day.
Say those times again.
He went missing around 1:30. They supposedly started searching right away. They called the police. Police told him they had to wait 24 hours. Gary called his wife immediately to tell her that Christopher was missing. They did not call Christopher's mother until 4:15 that day, which was 3 hours after he went missing.
So they called the police.
Supposedly, and the police told him they had to wait 24 hours. And then he called his own wife.
Who did they know on the police force?
Well, supposedly it was the law back then still that you had to wait 24 hours, but
yeah, but they were on a work. They're a work site though. That's a work site.
That's just what they claim happened. So this is a quote from his mother. They called me a few minutes to 5 to tell me that they couldn't find him, and she said they waited 3 hours to call me and tell me they couldn't find him. So with Christopher not being seen since around like the 1:30 mark, Anne said she still didn't understand why she hadn't gotten that call immediately after he went missing. I was shocked that it had happened that morning and they hadn't said anything to me. So I think it happened around lunchtime, she said. With little answers from his coworkers, the family conducted their own search that evening. And so early the next morning, they went together she says, we went together as a family and some of our friends, and we combed the woods in the area where they were surveying, supposedly, and we went through and we could not find Chris. Although they did not find Chris, they found things that belonged to him. Near the area where he was last seen, the crew, like where they were last seen with the crew, his family found one of his work boots hanging from a barbed wire fence. All of the tools he had been using laying on the ground, and scattered nearby was a blue work glove and a piece of blue fabric believed to be from his work pants. Now, if you remember, his co-workers claimed they searched for him and didn't find anything. This was literally the work site, and his family went out on their own and found all of this stuff in their search.
That doesn't sound like an alien abduction. I'm just saying.
So his family found these items. His coworkers thought Chris walked off on his own accord, but his family believes he was taken against his will based on how his tools were left and that they were kind of scattered. And there was like 12 cents on the ground that they found. So they feel like he had been carried and things were falling out of his pockets. You know what I mean? Like he's being carried, things are just falling out, like the change and stuff.
Yeah.
Because like, why would 12 cents randomly be on the ground? So all of the evidence found was from Christopher's own family, despite what, there's some articles that say the coworkers found it, but it was later confirmed that it was actually all the family. So the only real investigation done by the law enforcement this time was they did some searches. They brought out some bloodhounds, but it wasn't like a very urgent type of matter. So once the official missing persons report was filed, local law enforcement and some volunteers and came out with tracking dogs and like a helicopter, and they combed the area. The search continued for days, but no further evidence of Christopher's whereabouts were found. It was like he had just vanished. But again, you have to remember this is a remote area. There's no homes. There's not a city. He was on foot, supposedly missing a boot. His car was back at the office. He was only 50 feet in between two coworkers. And they supposedly started searching immediately. So, like, how far could he really have gotten on foot if they, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like they would have caught up to him. Anyways, so authorities were baffled by the lack of physical evidence. Despite the extensive search, the only clues that were found were near that barbed wire fence. There were no other signs of him until 5 months later, when a farmer found his other boot sitting on a swampy part of his land about 900 yards from where he vanished. There were no footprints or signs that Christopher had walked away from the scene, and the dense woods and rough terrain made the search even more challenging. And since then, nothing else has ever been discovered. Harris County Sheriff Mike, Georgia Sheriff Mike Jolly said that they took this case very seriously and did everything by the book, searching in ponds nearby and using cadaver dogs. With limited resources, the Georgia Bureau of Investigations took over the case, leading them to find the other shoe. But that's not actually true, because the farmer found the shoe on his own property and called the police. So they were like taking credit for something that they did not even do. So the assumption was that, this is from the sheriff. So the assumption was at the time that he was at work, he walked off the job site, which was consistent with what the coworker said, walking through the woods, went over towards the interstate, and we believe that he got into an automobile and just left the area. But with no call to Christopher to his mother in over 4 weeks, supposedly he changed his assumption. He said, "My biggest fear is that when he came up missing in 2002, he went to a large city. Right after he came up missing, he might have overdosed or something else might have happened to him because he had no identification on him, and the city went ahead and disposed of him."
And all of a sudden, this
he was
a drug addict.
So of course,
so racist.
So his family, of course, did not believe any of this. They said he didn't have a drug problem. It says, "I don't believe that Chris walked away. I don't believe he disappeared with one shoe. Who's going to walk away with one boot on in the cold weather on a royal road? I just don't believe that happened. They know what happened to Chris, and they're just not telling us." So the Georgia Bureau of Investigation was, like I mentioned, called in to assist with the case. They conducted interviews with the crew members and anyone who might have been in the area at the time. And despite their despite their efforts, surprise, surprise, there was no new information and the case grew cold. The police, in their mind, determined that Christopher walked away from the job site to start a new life and simply closed the case. The GBI still considers it a cold case, and technically it remains open for them. So Christopher's boss reportedly said that he had been acting strangely leading up to his disappearance, but he never elaborated on what he meant by that or like how he was acting strangely, why they thought it was. They didn't ask him. Like, they just said he was acting strangely.
Did they take pictures of everybody that was on that work team that day? Like, take pictures of their body to see if there's any struggle marks, any wounds, any, bruising or cuts or scrapes? I will
give you one guess on how to answer that question. However, Anne refuted this about her son's behavior, saying that Chris lived with me. I saw him every single day. We left at the same time. There was nothing strange about his behavior, and he was not in any distress. Because one thing they said was like, maybe he had like a psychotic break and just started running. But his family was like, if he was running, like, why, like, how did he not get caught up in the barbed wire? And why did he just take off one boot? And why is there no other sign of him? Like, why are there no footprints and all this other stuff? So anyways, Anne went on to say that she believed Christopher was a victim of foul play and that his coworkers know more than what they told the investigators. She stated in interviews that even if Christopher was to walk off the job on his own, there's no way he would have taken off his one boot in the wilderness in the middle of January when it was literally 55 degrees outside. She said another issue with the story was that Chris never went back to his car and his keys were never found. So his mother was just not convinced that he just walked off to start a new life with no shoes, no car, nothing, without saying goodbye to her at least. If you were to believe his coworkers and the police, Christopher removed one boot, climbed over or through barbed wire fence, which is how a piece of his like blue fabric from his pants were there, walked miles away in the freezing cold wearing one boot to that swampy property that the farmer owned, removed his other boot, and then just kept going till he got to some random road and got into a vehicle and then disappeared to become a drug addict somewhere. That's basically what their theory boils down to.
If you found a boot on your property in a swampy part of your property, would you call the police?
I would certainly, yes. And I would certainly wonder where it came from. But they claim they never saw any blood trails anywhere. No blood, no struggle, no footprints. So, like, if he was, why aren't there any footprints? Like, even around the barbed wire. Why? Like, I just don't understand.
Why was there no blood around the barbed wire? I mean, he probably nicked himself. Was there any DNA? I mean,
supposedly no. There was no DNA anywhere. No fingerprints, nothing. And the only witnesses are the three coworkers.
Magical. And they didn't take photos of the coworkers. I'm not saying they did it, but they did it.
No, but let me tell you about these coworkers.
Ooh,
Police never suspected the coworkers of any wrongdoing, despite the three men being the last people to see him alive. Funny enough, though, one of the coworkers did retain a lawyer immediately following Christopher's disappearance.
Not suspicious.
Another coworker was sentenced to a long prison term on a violent crime conviction just months after the disappearance. And to this day, the police have not released the name of his three coworkers. So unless you just happened to be in his town and knew who they were, they won't release the names.
Because they're guilty AF. That's it.
So the community didn't believe he went missing on his own accord either. And
really?
And on September 20th, 2002, there was a protest of about 50 people, mostly African Americans, gathered in front of the police station to protest not so much what the police were doing, but more so of what they were not doing. They saw the failure to locate Chris and how quickly and easily it was written off as a voluntary disappearance as a lack of effort by the police department. The police felt like they went above and beyond, though. During an interview with that sheriff, Mike Jolly, he said he actually tried to take some of the blame off himself. Well, okay, he didn't say. He actually tried to take some of the blame off himself and shifted onto Chris by saying that Chris's mother had admitted that Chris was using drugs the week prior. What? But he never specified what kind of drugs, and, like, honestly, it could have been anything. Like, she just said he smoked weed with some buddies. So it was just a lazy way for him to shift the blame off the police. And even if he was doing drugs the week before, what the hell does that have to do with his disappearance on a job site where his coworkers are literally mid-sentence with him and 50 feet away? Like, it's not even like, that does nothing about their story make sense. And the fact that one got a lawyer right away, one called his wife immediately, they didn't call his mom for 3 hours, and then the other one shortly after went to prison for a violent crime so bad that it was long-term, like, sentencing. Like, bizarre. But if you don't believe his coworkers are guilty, here are some other theories. The first one does talk about his coworkers. It's foul play. Some speculate that Christopher might have been the victim of foul play. However, there were no known enemies or reasons why someone would target him. The crew members were, and this is, I use this term loosely, the crew members were thoroughly investigated, but no evidence suggested their involvement in his disappearance. I feel like everything suggested their involvement in his disappearance, but what do I know? The area where Christopher vanished was remote, making it unlikely that a random passerby could have been involved without some kind of trace. Some believe it's possible he got into an argument with his coworkers and they made him disappear. Many found it odd that all three people's stories remained so similar for over 20 years. Like, nothing about the story changed. They didn't remember anything new. They didn't falter. It was like a cut and paste story for all three of them every time they've been interviewed about it. Others find it extremely strange that, according to his coworkers, they began searching for him immediately. And it was, and if that was the case, how would Chris have walked or even ran so quickly that they wouldn't have been able to catch up with him, especially if he stopped to remove a boot and if he got caught in the barbed wire? So, not to mention that 3-hour period I talked about where they didn't call his mother. And so she was like, what were they doing during that 3-hour period? But we'll never know, because according to the police, they were investigated and cleared of any like possible whatever. Like, they didn't do anything to it. So the second theory is an animal attack. The dense woods in the proximity to a rural area led some to suggest that an animal might have attacked Christopher. Yet, again, there were no signs of an animal attack. There was no blood, no torn clothing. The crew members claimed they didn't hear anything. So while large predators are present in Georgia, an attack without any trace of evidence seemed improbable, especially since they never found, like, bones or remains or anything. So the third theory is environmental hazards. This theory is that Christopher may have fallen into a hidden sinkhole or an abandoned well. However, extensive searches of the area did not reveal any such hazards, and the terrain was difficult to navigate, but investigators supposedly, again, thoroughly checked for any hidden dangers that might have caused his disappearance. I don't know that I trust anything these police in this particular little town do. So I should note that the little town where all of this happened was unincorporated. So they didn't really have, like, a government of any sort. They just kind of functioned. And it was a very small town of maybe, like, I think they said a little over 1,000 people in this entire town. So it wasn't a big town. They don't have a government, like, system in place. Anywho, so voluntary disappearance was the fourth, which is, again, some have suggested he just voluntarily disappeared, but this has continuously been dismissed by his family and friends, who insist he had no reason to leave. Christopher had no history of mental illness, no personal issues. He didn't have anything that would cause him to just want to walk away. And he left all of his personal items behind. He left his car, he left his clothes, his wallet, everything was left behind. So, like, they're like, how would he even go about, like, starting over? Then there was the supernatural or paranormal. While less grounded, some have speculated about supernatural or paranormal. Stories of people vanishing in thin air have long been around. However, again, there's no evidence to support this.
Especially since a boot was found 900, how do you say, 900 yards away.
Which is like, I think they said maybe a couple miles. Anyways, and then the last one, and I'm sure some of you have heard of the missing 411 cases. So the 411 is a series by David Paulides. I don't know how to say his last name, but David. And it's focused on people who, listen, guys, we all know I can't pronounce words. Paulides.
Sure.
David Paulides. I don't know, where he focused on people who disappeared in Royal North America under very bizarre and unexplained circumstances.
It's a show?
No, it's a book.
Oh, okay.
But it may be a show now, but it started out as a book, and it's called The Missing 411.
Oh,
and
I've
so
heard of it before.
Some thought that maybe Christopher could be part of this. However, they kind of ruled it out because almost every case in the missing 411 were they were like white people, right? Like they were like young people. He just didn't fit the overall, like his whole situation, like the whole boot and the coworkers. That was just not really how these other, like a lot of these other people were like hikers or something of that nature, where it's a lot more likely for them to disappear when people wouldn't have known. You know what I mean? Like it made more sense for these people.
To me, this seems like a no-brainer. And I think everybody at home is probably in agreement with this. Like, because there were 3 people, there were pieces of stuff found. It wasn't like you, poof.
Yeah. And so it was just, I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't that he was African American, that he wasn't considered part of the missing 411. It was just that the evidence surrounding the situation just didn't make sense based on the other people that the series is focused on. Mm-hmm. Some said Bigfoot, portal in time, aliens, but it's all nonsense. Because again, his coworkers clearly did it.
If we only knew their names, but and that's the thing. There's really not a mystery. Yeah. There's just really not a mystery.
It's a mystery why the police had jobs.
That's the mystery to me. That's the mystery. Because I think any web sleuth. This is pre-web sleuthing, isn't it? 2002, you said.
I don't even think it would take.
I mean, could we find?
5-year-old could solve this case.
Could we find? If we told this story to my kids, would they be like, so? We could wrap it up in a succinct little story for them, and like, what do you think happened? Like, well, yeah.
I feel like the cold case crackers would have already had this just.
The cold case crackers would have done.
Had to bring them back.
So this is pre-web sleuthing. Has anybody since then gone out and, I mean, obviously the coworkers did it, but have they gone out and researched that area to see if there's human remains?
Well, I'll talk about that here in a second. Okay, so supposedly, now I could not find names of these people, so I think this may have been fabricated by the police, so take this with a grain of salt. There were a few.
Are we believing the police right now?
I do not believe this statement, but it says there were a few witness reports that added to the mystery. Some local residents claimed to have seen a suspicious vehicle near the area on the day Christopher's disappearance. What made it suspicious? How did they see it when there's only like 1,000 people in this town and they were in the woodlands? I don't fucking know. But these leads, in a very shocking twist, led to no results. Additionally, a psychic contacted the family claiming to have visions of Christopher, but these also led nowhere. So, witness accounts in this case were often very unreliable. I know that comes as a shock to everybody. But supposedly the police department thoroughly investigated every lead they got. They loved to use the word thoroughly. These are their words, not mine. The suspicious vehicle was never identified and no evidence linked to Christopher's disappearance. The psychic's visions, while providing some hope to the family, yielded no tangible results.
Wow.
I know. Who would have guessed?
I mean, shocker.
A lot of the problems with this case is that all of the statements primarily came from his coworkers, and none of them made sense. How could someone disappear that quickly, that close, while working together in a crew of 3 and just vanish? So Christopher's family has never given up hope. They have continued to raise awareness about his disappearance. They hold vigils. They speak to the media. They have a Facebook page for him. The emotional toll on Christopher's family has been immense. His mother, in particular, has been a vocal advocate for continuing the search and keeping the case in the public eye. The family believes that someone somewhere knows what happened and could lead to answers. In 2008, so they had a visual, and at this visual, it caused the Columbus Ledger-Inquirer to kind of like take interest in the case, and so they spoke to his mother, and she said she knew that Christopher had probably passed away, but she wanted closure, and she was not buying what his coworkers said or what the police thought. And again, she was like, it's just ridiculous that he took off a boot, walked through barbed wire, emptied out change on the ground, and then walked for miles in 55-degree weather through woods and marshy area only to remove his one remaining boot and start a new life. I mean, how much more ridiculous of a story do you really, like, why would the man...
And he was, he was still a child.
Yeah.
This is college age. Could he afford college? He might have been at college. You know what I mean? Like, this is like a young person who is now going to leave in the middle of winter, barely clothed, because if you don't have your shoes on and you're walking through marsh, you might die of hypothermia. And then you're going to go to the big city and die as a drug addict, even though you've smoked pot maybe once, you didn't drink, and you loved Jesus.
Yeah. And your family. Yeah.
And your and your family. But like the faith was a big part of his life.
Yeah, he was a very devout Christian.
And so that means something. Yeah. Like, you didn't speak to your pastor or your priest. There wasn't. If your faith is something that's important to you, you're going to have these. Someone else is going to, if not your family, someone else is going to know. Right. I don't know. It's such a stretch to imagine that this child, because I mean, I'm old that I can say child, that this child would have done that. And
to me, the fact that his mother worked for the owner of the company and they still didn't call her, he called his wife instead, maybe to like help cover his tracks.
I mean, that's super suspicious. Whatever. Why call your wife? What does your wife have anything to do with this?
Yeah.
I mean, I talk to my husband a couple of times a day, but it's just seriously, like, not after a crisis.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what just happened before I talk to anybody else. You know?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. It was just very bizarre, considering that she worked for him and she wasn't even a thought until 3 hours later. So in 2009...
I totally forgot that aspect. Jesus.
Yeah, she was the babysitter for the owner.
Jesus. Okay.
So in 2009, human bones, including a pelvis, skull, and leg bones, were found near I-85, which is where they had been working, by a hunter. It was like Memorial Day 2009. So the police said that they had determined that these bones had been there for at least a year.
Oh my God.
There were 3 people that they thought they could belong to.
Wait, you said what year?
They were found in 2009.
Oh, so that's a lot of years.
Yeah, okay. But the bones had been there for at least a year, so it's possible that it could have been from 2002.
More. Okay.
So there were 3 people they thought that these bones could belong to, Christopher being one of them. However, for whatever reason, it took 3 years, and in 2012, they determined that it didn't actually belong to any of those 3 people at all. That belonged to someone completely different. So,
was he one of the 3 people?
He was one of the 3 people they thought it could belong to, but after like 3 years of running tests or whatever, it came back and it was none of the people they thought it could have been. So in 2015, Columbus community activist presented the case as an example of delayed justice, claiming that the sheriff's department and the investigators had not done enough to help Chris's family.
Amen.
And they believed it was simply because he was African American. The area in which he lived, was predominantly, white people. And it was a small kind of country town. And it was the early 2000s. And so they just believed that these people put more effort into searching for missing people who were not African American. And so they went on to once again call attention to how ridiculous the police and his coworkers' theories were. It didn't make sense to anybody at all whatsoever. And I'm sure if you're listening right now, it doesn't make sense to you.
No, it doesn't.
Regardless of skin color, the story does not make any fucking sense. So shortly after these activists presented this case, a private investigator took on the case pro bono. He brought renewed energy and perspective to the investigation. He re-examined all of the original evidence, conducted new interviews, went through all of the files that were available. And there were some that the GBI would not release to him because they claimed it was an open case still. So technically they couldn't give him anything. But like, if you're not going to investigate it, why not let this person investigate it? Anyways, so unfortunately, no new leads emerged from the private investigator. But the private investigator's involvement brought some new hope to the family. But again, the case, he just couldn't find anything new.
Too long.
So in 2018, the Harris County, Georgia Sheriff's Office put out another request for information about Chris's disappearance. And this was because there was a lot of pressure on them. Because again, all of these people were like, this doesn't make sense. There's activists involved. There's protesters. The family's continuing. So they put out this request for information.
Yeah.
They asked that anybody with knowledge to come forward, but nobody came forward. And his family once again stated they believe only his coworkers know what really happened. So supposedly the GBI says any new information is always immediately investigated, and the authorities remain committed to finding out what happened to Christopher, but without new leads, there's really nothing they can go on. And the family's determination and their continued efforts, just they hope that they'll find the truth, or at least find his body, so that they personally again can have closure. So his disappearance had a really big impact on their community. I mean, they were from this small town. It was unincorporated. It was a little over 1,000 people. It was not a big town.
And 50 people showed, 50 out of 1,000. That's big for that little town. Yes.
So the disappearance had a profound impact on his local community. Residents of Harris County were shocked and saddened by the mystery.
It's weird to hear you keep saying Harris County. I'm so sorry.
I know. When I was reading it and I was listening to some podcasts, I was like, whoa, it threw me off the first time I heard it. But they were saddened by this mysterious circumstances of his disappearance. Many joined in on search efforts with the family, and the case remains a topic of conversation and concern. The community support has been really crucial for his family, like the outpouring of assistance and the willingness of the locals to participate in these searches and these visuals to kind of keep his case going is really a source of comfort to the family. And so his case at the time really highlighted the challenges faced in missing persons investigations in rural and wooded areas. Because the lack of physical evidence, the difficulty of searching dense terrain, and the possibility of all of these different hazards really complicated the efforts to missing individuals. As we all know, authorities often rely on technology, like drones and advanced search equipment, but those all have limitations. And at this time, they really weren't, in 2002, there wasn't a whole lot of the stuff we have now where they can do all of this vision, what is it called?
Like infrared
Yeah,
stuff.
infrared
and
stuff,
But
yeah.
all they had to do was take fucking pictures of the fucking coworkers and their
All they had to do
fucking
was just
bug-
arrest the coworkers.
Honestly, they could have. I bet if they even looked for a second, they'd be like, they probably had black eyes or some shit. That he did not go down. I'm riled up, man.
I know. So his disappearance was a very stark reminder of the uncertainties that come with searching for missing persons. So since his disappearance in 2002, there have been advancements in technology, and the investigation kind of techniques have improved. However, the drones, the thermal imaging, the improved search, and all of those things, they just didn't provide any of the breakthroughs that were needed because, again, it has been so long since this happened. And so, like, more than 20 years has passed since he went missing. And so, I mean, none of those technologies are really going to help at this point.
I know. You just wish that the family could have some peace and some closure. You know, that's why you tell these stories. You want the ending.
Yeah.
You're looking for someone to have the information to give us the ending.
So Rosalind Mathis, which is his aunt, said, "We just want justice done for Chris. He deserves it, and we deserve it."
Yes.
And it's been 21 at the time of that, like her interview. It had been 21 years since Anne McKenzie had laid eyes on her son. She said it was a normal morning for them on January 25th when they both headed out the door. So again, Christopher Thompkins is described as African-American male. He was about 5'7". He weighed about 125 pounds when he was last seen. So he was a little tall,
skinny.
And so it would have been very easy for three people to overpower him. You know what I mean? So anyways, he has brown hair that was braided at the time and brown eyes. The day he disappeared, he was wearing a black shirt, a blue and gray plaid jacket with a gray hood, navy blue Dickie work pants, tan work boots, which obviously he took off and walked away, and a black skull cap and black watch. His watch was never found. Neither were like any of his other clothing. So his clothes were never found. His work boots were the only things, and then 12 cents and his tools that he was using for the job that day. He has a tattoo on his right arm of an ice cream cone with his nickname written in vertical letters inside the design. It was just a short version of it. It was Chris. And the ice cream part of the tattoo is the head of a Joker wearing a hat. And so anyone with information, no matter how insignificant you think it may be, on the whereabouts of Christopher is asked to contact either the Georgia Bureau of Investigation or the Harris County Sheriff's Office, and the number will be in the post. And then all of the like the Georgia Bureau of Investigation file is going to be in the resource notes of the podcast. I just feel like we should all just be like, the coworkers did it. Maybe look at them, because that's how I feel. I feel like, what the fuck is there to investigate?
I'm right behind you. Right behind you. I mean,
that's my story. I'm just so upset by it because, like, in a lot of disappearance cases, it is very uncertain what may have happened. Like, anything could have happened. Some of it's like, I could see them walking away because they had an unhappy marriage, or, you know, they were a drug addict or whatever. In a lot of cases, you can kind of explain it. There is no explanation for this other than his coworkers did it. So,
Go ahead.
No, that was this. I forgot to mention that earlier. And one of the other theories was Bigfoot. But again, I feel like your coworkers would have seen. You kind of said
Bigfoot. Oh, so Bigfoot is also not quiet. He walks around stunk. I've never met him, but I can imagine that if you're someone named Bigfoot, you probably make big steps. I don't think he's like.
And when he take the person that was bigger with more meat on it, you know what I'm saying?
It's like that. He's probably really stringy, that kid. You know.
I feel bad for the family because it is so obvious what happened, or not so much obvious what happened, but it's obvious who did it, and they're never going to get this closure because one of the coworkers is in prison, one had an attorney, and the police said, none of them are involved. So. And I did look up updates, and it's more or less the same.
Has anyone done a FOIA on who those coworkers were?
I don't think so. In all of the articles I looked at, and I looked at a bunch, and even the podcast I read, none of them had the names of these coworkers.
Well, you have to probably send in for a FOIA. That might be something. Freedom of Information Act. Sorry, I'm just saying FOIA. Freedom of, like you could they can't hide that.
So there was a podcast I listened to that said he requested information, including that, from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and they told him because it's still technically an open case, they couldn't provide him with any information other than what was already publicly, released. That's what they told him. Like he had the little letter of
there might be a way around that. I don't know. That's maybe he was asking the wrong body, like, because for them it's opened, but for that police department it's closed.
I just feel like why is it so secretive? If you don't technically have anything. I mean, if you technically don't have anything, who are you protecting?
Right.
Like, why is it so crazy? Why can't a podcaster with less than 1,000 subscribers? Because he was small time too,
Oh yeah.
Not
hey, I thought you were talking about us.
well,
I was like,
too.
oh shit.
But why can you not just tell us the name of coworkers? Like, I mean, he's in prison. What is he gonna like? What does it matter? He's already in jail for something else. So like, I don't know.
For a violent crime.
Yes, only months after this happened. So I mean, I don't know.
Ding. Well,
it gets me frustrated.
I don't know how I'm going to top it. Yes, I do. No, I'm just kidding.
I've already found when I was researching this, I found my next story.
Oh, you're like, oh, I got it. Okay. Well, I have a couple of things that I'm working on. So this is, it'll be a good story next week. Just come, just show up. We might have Sarah.
Sarah has been begging us to come back. I guess we have to forgive her.
She swore you would not let her back on, and I
don't even remember why I was upset now.
I don't even.
It was pretty dramatic. Some tracks.
It was when she was pregnant and didn't tell us, and she was just being really snarky that night. And we were like, we thought she was drinking, but nay, Sarah was sober.
That makes it worse. I think I'm mad all over again now because she was sober.
Because we said we had this many listeners or whatever. She was like,
she was surprised because when we said we were number one.
She was like, that's shocking.
Now it's all flooding back into my memory on why she wasn't invited.
Oh, Sarah's gonna hate me. I'm gonna hear about it.
I guess she can come back. It's not my house to invite or not invite people.
With the eye roll. Okay. Well, we're going to have Sarah with some commentary. I love it. Love it so much. And we went to go see the Broadway version of Lion King last night. That was super
random. Very, very happy for you. Go on. I don't know how we got there from talking about Sarah.
Me either. That'll be a mystery for
that's gonna be our next week case.
That's a mystery for the ages. Anyway, so
was it good at least since you brought it up? Was it great?
It's amazing. It's amazing. So on that note, I think we should, end it on a happy note. What do you think?
Okay.
All right.
In a world of crime and mystery, they work for us. Researching history, Kat and Ashley with a case to crack. On the move, never looking back. Case files with Kat and Ashley. Always funny, sometimes trashy. Solving crimes with a beer in hand. Drunk detectives in a crazy land. From the studio to the scene of a crime. Technical issues all the time. With charm and wit, they're quite a sight. And Kevin the goat, he screams all night. sight to behold. When he turns this shit show into gold, he turns the shit show into gold. He turns this shit show into gold. He smiles with Kat and Ashley, always fun, sometimes trashy. Two drunk heroes with a silly embrace, and a hidden hero who makes the case. He screams all night. He screams all night.
Bye.